hand it over to Brenda.
Perfect.
Take it away.
Okay, are we recording?
We should, do you see the red dot? Yes, we are.
We are, okay. I can't see it, but just making sure. Okay. Welcome everyone to Using Biologicals to Manage Your Sweet Potato and Potato Crop. I am Brenda Palencia, a marketing intern at Maroon Bio. Before we get started, just a quick reminder for CEU credits. For California, you do have to take a quiz at the end of the webinar. We will give you a link along as a QR code at the end, so make sure to take that at the end. And for Washington and Oregon, you do have to participate during the webinar in the chat section. If you're not sure where to find it, it should be on the top right corner of your screen, and just make sure to participate during the webinar. So before we get started, Maroon Bio Innovations is a publicly traded company, so we are required to remind you that any information discussed in this presentation should not be solely used to determine your interest and/or level of investment in its stock. We encourage you to conduct your own due diligence when making financial investment decisions about Maroon Bio Innovations. Now let's introduce our speakers. Today we have Hal Blackmore. Hal is currently a territory sales manager at Maroon Bio Innovations. Since January 2018, Hal relocated from Florida and covers territories in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and Northern Florida. Hal holds a BS in horticultural science from North Carolina State University and has 21 years in ag sales experience. We also have Mary Wilks. Mary founded Carolina Precision Consulting in 1997, following graduation from North Carolina State with a BS in agronomy and a master's of crop science with a precision ag emphasis. Mary started the business of scouting cotton and peanuts in Halifax County, North Carolina, and over time expanded the range of services to include nutrient management and organic and gap consulting. We have our agenda. We just went over our introduction. We will move forward with biologicals and best practices for sweet potatoes and potatoes, including Magistine. We will also go over field data and pass it over to Mary. Then at the end, we will go over a review and a Q&A. I can hand it over to Hal.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Glad y'all could make it to the webinar. And I am the sales manager for the South with Maroon Bio Advance. Brenda, advance. Just a little company overview. We were founded in 2006. We had an IPO. We're listed on the NASDAQ. The IPO was in 2013, and our headquarters has just moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, in the Briar Creek area. Our manufacturing facilities are in Bangor, Michigan, and we are moving all of our manufacturing to the Michigan location. We do have a national sales organization and tech support teams. We do distribute globally, and we have 450 worldwide patents and a library of over 18,000 microbes, most of which we hope to monetize at some point in the future. Our new CEO is Kevin Helash, and he has just relocated to the Raleigh, North Carolina area himself. Next slide. So here you see the map with our sales representatives. You see my territory there in purple. I actually also have Tennessee and Arkansas, but hope to soon backfill the Florida, South Alabama, and South Georgia territory. Above me, you see Steve Bogash in the Northeast, who has a dual role as both sales rep and R&D position there. In the upper Midwest, John Driver, and then Brad Passion is in the Midwest, working predominantly on Pacesetter and row crops in general. Over there in the eastern Pacific Northwest, you see Amelia Jordan, and western PNW would be Lois Hopkins. Down a little bit further there, Nick Steeneken, who covers Northern California and Nevada, Alex Jackson in the Fresno area, as well as Doug McDowell, and then Taylor Hoover down there in middle California. And then there's Brian Guess, who has a little territory starting with Southern California, going all the way up into Colorado. Forward slide. And so this is just their contact information for the people that I just mentioned. If you need a number, those are on our website and available to you anytime, or a copy of the recording of this presentation. Forward, please. And this is our technical support team, beginning over in the right-hand side. Dr. Tim Johnson, our VP of Field Development and Tech Support. He's up in Virginia. Brian Miller up in the Midwest and East. And also Steve Bogash has tech support responsibilities up there in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Over to the West, Dr. Melissa O'Neill over there in San Luis Obispo area, and up in the PNW, Mariana Serdani. So that's our sales and tech support team. Now next. Okay, let's take a quick look at the Maroon Bio Portfolio. Let's begin with Jet Ag, 5% peroxyacetic acid. That's the formulation for use in crop. It's both a fungicide, bactericide, and disinfectant. Then there's the jet oxide products, both the 5% and 15%. The 5% is used for hard ag surfaces for disinfecting. And I know many of the sweet potato growers in North Carolina are using jet oxide in their production line for both disease control and getting rid of human pathogens like salmonella, listeria, and things like that. Then we have our fungicides, Regalia and Stargus. Regalia is an excellent material for downy mildew, botrytis, black rot, and alternaria spot in cabbage. Stargus is, well, that was Stargus. Regalia is more of a powdery mildew, plant health, and various bacterial diseases in various crops, like bacterial spot and speck in tomatoes. Then we have our heat stress management product, Haven. Haven also helps with preventing sunburn. And the big difference between our product is that it goes on clear, it mixes with just about anything, and there's no tank, line strainer, or nozzle cleanout required. Then we have our insecticides and Nematicide. Grand Evo and Venerate are two excellent miticides, as well as control of armyworms, diamondback moth larvae, and various soft-bodied insects like aphids, thrips, whiteflies, etc. And then we have Majestine, which we're going to spend more time on today, and Zelto is the turf label for Majestine. Then we come to Pacesetter, which is a new plant health product. It's a 12% Renutria formulation, and it will be directed more towards the mega crop market. And then through our acquisition of ProFarm out of Finland, we've acquired their product line, which includes a lot of seed treatments and the foliar fertilizer lines like Foramin, UBP 110, and Emergin. And I believe those latter three products are distributed for those in Europe, and Brazil is Corteva, and those products have been on over 25 million acres. Next slide. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into Majestine Bionimaticide, and I should say / insecticide, plus the next generation of Majestine, which for the time being is MBI 306. Next slide. So just a little bit more about Majestine first. It controls both nematodes, wireworms, and white grubs. It's used on potatoes and other tuberous crops like sweet potatoes, of course, sugar beets, and carrots. It's used a lot in small fruit like strawberries, where it's usually run through the drip. Same for cucurbits and fruiting vegetable crops. It's particularly useful in those crops where they have drip, especially where they're putting a second or third crop on there. And then right below, you see a little bit of data there where you see the untreated control in the brown, and then you see Vitate in the gray and Majestine in the purple. And you see we stack up quite well with the conventional product there. Key benefits of Majestine are higher yields for the reduction and repulsion of nematodes and wireworms. It does show a positive health effect on root development. And of course, it has excellent worker safety and application flexibility. And I should mention that it is OMRI approved for organic production. Next slide. So when we're thinking about the next generation, MBI 306, it gives excellent performance at much lower rates than we're talking about today here with Majestine. So it's a new optimized fermentation process that allows us to produce the metabolites that give the control at a much higher concentration. It is highly effective both against its insects, mites, and nematodes. It's high potency with significantly reduced application rates. We're talking about, in most cases for field applications, between 10 and 20 fluid ounces per acre. And of course, it has a great safety profile because more than likely it will be OMRI approved. As far as its status goes right now, we did submit our regulatory package to EPA in September of last year. And we do have field development trials underway to support registrations in other countries such as Brazil. And I would mention that Mary has also done work with it here locally in a couple of trials. As far as the markets that MBI 306 will reach, will be seed and soil applied, plus foliar applications, a broad range of target insects, mites, and nematode pests. It will be marketed in North America, Latin America, and Europe. And it will be labeled in corn, soybeans, cotton, tobacco, and a wide range of horticultural crops, including sweet potatoes and potatoes. Next slide. So let's get going with sweet potatoes. Brenda, if you could advance the slide to the next one. So what are the key points that are important to Majestine? Number one, it is a true nematicide. Nematodes in the soil where Majestine has been applied stop moving 24 hours of after treatment, and they die in 48 to 72 hours. So it is a true nematicide, not just repelling them. When Majestine is in contact with the plant roots, the production of root exudates repulses most nematodes. If some nematodes get in the roots, they cannot complete their life cycle and they die. And here's a very important part: gall formation is reduced. Majestine remains in the roots for a good while. And Majestine does have plant health effects stimulating root development. Next slide. Labeled crops, a very wide range of crops. You see a few things are not labeled for use in California, but of course labeled for that whole list of crops across the country other than in California. Next slide. Majestine also is pretty broad in its nematode reach. Good control of lesion, reniform, ring, root knot, soybean cyst, stubby root, sting, and stunt. And over there on the right, you can see several of the 2 double E labels that we have in various crops for wireworms and grubs and nematodes in specific crops. Next. Let's first start by taking a look at some data from North Carolina. And I know this is not in sweet potatoes, but I know many sweet potato growers are either also tobacco growers or they have been at one time. And of course, it comes from a very credible source, Lindsay Thiessen at North Carolina State University when she was still at NC State. I believe she's now with USDA. This trial was in 2019, and this particular slide is showing number of root knot nematodes per 500 cc of soil. And you can see the untreated in the brown, Vellum Prime at 6.5 fluid ounces per acre in transplant water there in the gray. And then you see Magistine at 2 gallons per acre through transplant water there at 1 application, just transplant water. And then next over there on the right, that purple bar, that's Magistine at 2 gallons per acre in the transplant water, followed by another gallon at first cultivation. Next slide. And, you know, I mentioned several times that Magistine has a plant health effect. This is looking at yield and it's pounds per plot. That's the green weight of tobacco, not cured. Again, you see the untreated control in the brown bar, Vellum Prime in the gray bar, Magistine, just the 2 gallon per acre in the transplant water. But look at the yield where Magistine went out not only in the transplant water, but another gallon at over the top and then cultivated in at first cultivation. That foliar application there at cultivation really drives the plant health effect. Next slide. Okay, this slide is very important, and this is a compilation of a number of trials across the Midwest in various crops. And this is in bushels per acre across 6 Midwest trial locations. And what I want you to notice in the 2 blue bars, Magistine at 4 quarts or a gallon and Magistine at 8 quarts with 2 gallons. When Magistine is going either in furrow or in transplant water or through the drip, in most cases, 1 gallon is as good as 2. Then we see in the green bars there, Magistine 306, the product that is coming, hopefully for launch next year. You see the first green bar at 10.5 fluid ounces, the second green bar at 21 fluid ounces. And compare that to the yellow bar there with 1 trial with capture and 1 trial with counter. So point being, if you're applying Magistine in transplant water or in furrow or through the drip, that's the most cost-effective way to do it. Next slide. And just a quick look at a trial from this year with MBI going in furrow for corn rootworm control, and you see the MBI 306 with a 13.8 bushel bump at 10.5 fluid ounces and almost a 20 bushel bump at the 21 fluid ounce compared to bifenthrin. And again, that will be priced for the mega crop market. Next slide. Okay, this is data from Dr. Tom Kuhar of Virginia Tech, and focus your attention on the table on the right, primarily looking at wireworms there. You see, and this trial had pretty high pressure, as you see on the left scale. You see the untreated, and you see Majestine going in 1 gallon in furrow, followed by another gallon post-emergence 4 weeks later. And you see it beating 2 gallons of Majestine going at each shot in furrow, followed by 2 gallons at the post-emergence treatment. And that's compared to Regent, or fipronil, if you will. And then you see Vellum Prime over there in the blue column on the right. Next slide. And again, from Dr. Tom Kuhar, Virginia Tech. Again, in furrow for soil pest in potatoes in 2020. And here we have some pretty high pressure. And again, looking at the table on the right there, you see the untreated control and Majestine at 1 and 1, not doing so great there. The Majestine at 2 gallons at each application, timing doing quite well. And then you see the MBI 306 in the yellow bars, as well as Vellum Prime over there in the blue bar, which didn't do well at all. And when we look back at 2020, I know in North Carolina, we had a lot of weeks right after planting where we had anywhere from 10 inches of rain in a week to 20 inches of rain in a week. So a little excessive water in those particular situations. Next slide. Again, this is this is Anders Huseth from North Carolina State University. These were trials done in 2020, and these were applied pre-plant incorporated ahead of planting. And again, where you're applying Majestine broadcast and pre-plant incorporating, you're mixing it with a lot more soil than you would if you were going in transplant water. And you can see how we compared to Brigade at 12.8 fluid ounces in the yellow, Floresman Advanced at half a gallon per acre. And then you see the Majestine and Brigade combination looking quite well, and Brigade and Movento there in the gray bar. One thing I would say about this, I don't think just the PPI application is enough. I think you really need to follow up at cultivation or lay-by with an additional application of Majestine with something like bifenthrin. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about our recommendations and a program that you can use. And we're talking about sweet potato production here for conventional producers. So you've got a choice. You can either go pre-plant incorporated at 2 gallons per acre, plus something like one of the neonics like Belay or Platinum or bifenthrin. Or in either case, you're going to have to do, I highly recommend that you use the at cultivation or lay-by treatment. But the choice is between the pre-plant incorporated or the transplant water treatment if you're set up for that kind of application. If you're a potato grower instead of a sweet potato grower, you'd put it in furrow, followed by a cultivation application about 3 to 4 weeks later. So you see the cultivation or lay-by application, again, 1 gallon over the row cultivated in with rolling cultivators and the sweep in the middle, and tank mix it with bifenthrin or something of that manner. Next, let's take a look at a organic program. Advance the slide, please. So this would be our program. And I know Mary's going to have more to say about that when she speaks. Again, Majestine at 2 gallons per acre, pre-plant incorporated. And I would recommend you tank mix that with something like either Azera or Azodirect. And there may be other products that would fit as well. or go with the transplant water treatment at 1 gallon per acre, depending on field pressure, plus Azera at 1 to 2 pints or azadirachtin, followed by an at cultivation or lay-by treatment with another gallon of Majestine plus Azera at 1 to 2 pints per acre over the top and cultivated in. Next slide. Okay, just wanted to remind you, this year, the past couple of years, we've had a large grower rebate program. This coming year in 2022, we're going to do that again. It's going to be essentially the same program that we had this past year. You're going to need to purchase a minimum of 40 gallons to qualify, and it will be a cash rebate directly to the grower of $25 per gallon. When you get, if either you send in your application with your invoices, when you send it to Majestine 2022 at Maroon Bio, if you're in my area, please copy me on that as well. And if you're in another area, please copy your sales rep in that area as well, so they can follow that through and make sure everything goes according to plan. Next slide. Okay, and that's just a statement of the various trademarks that we may have used in the talk here. So next, I think we're getting ready to turn it over to Miss Mary Wilks. And I guess when you're ready, go ahead and take it away. Oh, by the way, I will mention that I will be at the North Carolina Sweet Potato Commission meeting a week from today in Goldsboro. I have a booth there. If y'all are in attendance, please stop by and say hello.
Okay, can y'all see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Started. Okay, very good. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. I'm an independent crop consultant, work with organic and conventional growers, mostly in Eastern North Carolina. We help growers with various certifications, including GAP and organic, and we also do agronomic consulting, including soil sampling and crop scouting. Because we work with so many organic growers, I'm always on the lookout for new pest control solutions. We did 2 trials that included Majestine in 2021 on sweet potatoes and tobacco. I'm going to share with you what we found so that it might help you on your crops this year. Start with our sweet potato trial. We had it in a field that had known guava-root nematode. And if you're not from North Carolina, guava is a species of root knot that has resulted in a quarantine being put on North Carolina sweet potatoes. It's not in all fields, but the fields it's in, if you grow potatoes in that field, it's likely to cause a great deal of damage to the point where you couldn't market those potatoes, and they're really hard to get rid of. So it's really important. But the field we had the trial in is a known interlobi field. It's a big field, 20 acres. We had 8 full replications. It's a commercial field, so we used the grower's equipment. Each plot was 8 rows. It's a sandy field. We used Majestine at 2 gallons per acre in the transplant water. We used 225 gallons of water, which is a lot for North Carolina, but it was dry at planting time, and that's what we felt we needed to get the potatoes off to a good start. We also followed up with a lay-by treatment at 1 gallon per acre over the top. At the end of the season, we collected yield and we rated potatoes for insect and nematode damage. And just to mention, we used a higher than labeled rate. We used 3 gallons total. like Hal talked about, most people would use 1 gallon early and 1 gallon at lay-by, or else 2 gallons at planting, but we used 3 gallons, so our cost was higher. Our cost would be like $195 an acre, but if you use normally like the 1 gallon, your cost would be about $130 an acre. Okay, here's a few pictures from planting day. One thing we noticed with the Majestine treatment was the plants grew off much faster and covered the ground quicker. On the right side, you can see that was our water only with no treatments in the water. And you can see, ground in the picture where the rows didn't completely meet middles, and you can also see a lot of weeds. The grower went in after this and hand pulled weeds, but it was a visible difference. You could drive by the field and see, there's 8-row strips where we had Majestine and did not have Majestine. There was, less weeds and more weeds. So it was pretty dramatic, a visual difference. Okay, now for our results. Now, this ended up being a really high pressure field, not only for nematodes, but for wireworms too. In our untreated control, you can see we had only 16% marketable potatoes. That's extremely low, and that just reflects on the pressure we had. Majestine did improve the marketability 7%, up to 23%, which is not a huge improvement, but it is an improvement over the untreated. We rated corn wireworm damage, which generally occurs from the overwintering generation. It's damage that occurs early. So the corn wireworm holes are the larger holes on the potatoes. Majestine showed a 14% reduction in corn wireworm damage over the untreated. We also rated the number of wireworm holes per potato, which Hal shared also from Tom Kuhar, and he saw the same thing where Majestine reduced the number of holes per potato. All right, and then on the yield, we did see a 27 bushel per acre increase in Majestine over the untreated. And then for total yield, which included jumbos and canners, we had a 53 bushel increase. I did some quick math just below that, comparing the yield of number ones at $14 a bushel, which is the current price for organic in North Carolina. And the total value will be $378 per acre. And the cost of material, like I said before, my cost was $195 for 3 gallons. So our net was $183. So it more than paid for itself using the Majestine. I went back and looked at where we had done trials in 2018 and 2019, and we saw similar results. We had higher yield in 18, a higher yield improvement in 18 than we did in 21. And then in 19, we had similar results in marketability. We had a 7% this past season and 10% in 19. Here's some photos from this season. The top photos where we had transplant water only. This top row, those are potatoes that have nematode damage on them, and the bottom potatoes did not. And in the bottom picture, that's where we had Majestine. We only had, looks like about 7 potatoes with nematode damage, and that whole bottom row did not have nematodes. And just looking at it, you can see the shape of the potatoes is much, much better also with Majestine. All right, and even though we had improvements with Majestine, the bottom line is if you have guava-root or inner low-by, you need to gas the field. And I know with organic you cannot do that, but if you're conventional, you just need to plan on fumigating. Let's see here. I also did a tobacco trial in 2021. Our tobacco field did not have inner low-by. It had standard southern root knot, which is incognita. This was a coastal plain type soil, Wilson, North Carolina. This field I've scouted for many, many years, and I knew it had a history of nematode problems. The last couple seasons I'd seen tobacco grown in that field, nematodes really affected it. You could see stunted plants, the color was off. I mean, it was very obvious it had a nematode issue. So I thought it was a great site. We used Majestine, the transplant water, and then we compared it with and without lay-by treatments, and we also had an untreated control. Some pictures from planting day. Okay, the way we evaluated the tobacco test was by doing root ratings. At the end of the season, when tobacco is harvested, they cut the plants off and then they flip the roots up. And so we went into each plot and we evaluated 5 roots in each plot, and we used this rating chart, and this is a standard for nematologists. You can see along the bottom, like this 10, that's as bad as it gets. That's extreme nematode damage, and then up here you have 0 and 1, that's very little damage. Okay, and then our results this year, we had 5 replications, so this was a large field. The average rating for our Majestine treatments was 1.74, and for our untreated was 3.23. So we did have a significant reduction in root knot damage from using Majestine. I looked at our lay-by treatments where we used Majestine, another gallon at lay-by, and we did not see a difference in our test on tobacco. So, just using transplant water was good enough in this case. I will mention that we did have a beautiful crop this year, even though I had seen damage in this field in the past. We visually, you cannot see an issue. So that was good. Most of the damage we saw was on the outer, like the outside edges of those roots where they went down into the ground. So the main roots stayed healthy through the season, and any root knot damage we saw kind of came in later on. All right, and just to review, for any producers, but especially organic, you really need to rely on your cultural practices. If you're growing sweet potatoes, avoid rotating with corn. Corn is a host for wireworms, and if you plant following corn, or even 2 years after corn, chances are you're going to have an issue in your sweet potatoes. Use resistant varieties. Beauregard is not grown so much in North Carolina, but some people still do for processing, but it's highly susceptible to root knot. So if you know you have nematodes, you need to plant Covington. In your rotation, use peanuts, also root knot resistant soybeans. In that tobacco field, I will mention that that particular grower, when he was having issues with nematodes, he was planting sweet potatoes and tobacco back to back. Almost every year was one of those 2 crops, and nematodes love those crops. And the past couple of years, that field had been planted in wheat and root knot resistant soybeans, and I could tell it made a huge difference. So that was really neat to see that in person and also measure it, with all our test results. Plant quality seed. I strongly believe that interlobi is moved around on plants. So if you're a sweet potato grower, you need to get plants from a grower that you trust. Be sure to cut those plants. Don't move any soil. It's all very, very important. We do a lot of nematode sampling. If you do pick up root knot, I advise getting the species identified. In North Carolina, we've got probably the best lab in the world. We're the best nematologists in the whole world here in North Carolina. And they can tell you, do you have interlobi or do you have root knot? What's your species, or do you have incognita? And then you know what you're dealing with. If you're an organic grower, you've got a farm infested with interlobi, my advice would be to take it out of organic production, clean it up, and then maybe transition it back. You can clean it up, but it's very, very risky putting an organic crop there. All right, and like we mentioned, for conventional, if you know you have root knot, I would fumigate with Telone. If you cannot fumigate and you want some extra insurance, I would definitely use Majestine or the transplant water Nematicide. We've had good results with Majestine, and we usually see a yield advantage out of it, so it's a good option. For wireworms, always apply insecticides at every opportunity. Hal discussed this. Pre-plant incorporated, right at planting when you're knocking off the rows, put another insecticide out, and then at lay-by, always cultivate. I like at least twice. Sometimes if you're planting late, you only have time to plow once. But if you're planted early, say early June, you definitely have time to put out an insecticide twice. All right. That's all I had. I'll be glad to take any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you so much. I believe we have one question in the comments. This is from Chris. Regarding the first presentation, why have vellum prime in wireworm trials when vellum prime is not labeled for this pest on any crop? It's only for nematodes and some diseases. Hal, I believe that would be for you.
I'm just reporting the data that Kuhar gave. So it was in the data, I reported it. I would like to make a comment and then a question for Mary. The pricing or the general pricing that Mary gave did not reflect the, the Majestine grower rebate. That would change the cost picture quite a bit with the, 1 gallon followed by 1 gallon would get us down in the $85 an acre range, somewhere in there. For the 2 gallon followed by 1 gallon, that would put us down somewhere in that $125 dollar an acre range. So, and then my question for Mary would be, in an organic situation, I mentioned both Azera and azadirachtin there. Now, what would be her recommendations for an organic grower to tank mix with Majestine? Oops, did we lose her? I think she may have dropped off.
Hey,
Hey, 1 second. I'll try to get her back on.
perfect, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Feel free to add them in the chat section. Okay, how do you see that question?
Yeah. For mealybug control, I would recommend Venerate with a good spreader sticker at 2 quarts per acre. It's slow, but it works great. And I see Nick Steeneken on there giving a thumbs up to that. And he wants to know, where is Todd located so we can call on him. I'm sure we've got more questions than that. Don't be bashful.
While we wait for a few more questions, I can go ahead and drop the link for the webinar quiz for credits, CEU credits.
There's another one.
There you go. Yep, there's one from Ophir. Which spreaders are recommended by MBI with Venerate?
I would just choose a really good spreader sticker to help hold the material to the plant and to help reduce wash off. There are a number of good ones, and I would hate to specifically mention any one particular brand.
Okay, Mary should be back on now. So let's see if we can get her. I'm not seeing her yet.
While we wait for Mary, we do have another question from Aaron. Does anyone have data on nematode control when used in furrow and cotton in Southeast US?
I believe there is some good data on that, and you'll be seeing more data with MBI 306, whatever we end up naming that product. It's going to look pretty good in furrow. Is Mary back?
I see a comment from Mary, but I'm not sure if she's able to unmute herself.
Yeah, we're working on that. Just give us a second.
Perfect. We have another question from Gary in the comments. Do you think that climate change will affect any of your results?
Will affect what?
Any of your results?
I think weather can affect just about any crop input. Too much rain, not enough. Too hot, too cold. Again, just on the pricing that she gave, I just wanted to again reiterate that the grower rebate drops that considerably. And we have Majestine available in both 2 by 2.5 gallon sizes and 265 gallon totes, which a lot of growers in North Carolina really like. And the price point on that is a little bit cheaper than the 2.5s. There she is. I think she's back. Mary, I had a question for you. For organic growers, as far as a mixing partner, tank mixing, both at the transplant treatment or pre-plant incorporated and the cultivation treatments, what would be your recommendation there? What would be the choice of partners that you would put there for organic especially, but also conventional?
As far as organic, we have not been tank mixing with anything. In 2018, we did some tank mixes, but you know, I might this year look at Melocon. We saw some good results from that. I know it's not a Marrone product, but that may be something that offers some help in nematode and wireworm control. As far as conventional, you know, any of the products you mentioned, the bifenthrin, if you can use Lorsban, use it. Most people that are exporting cannot use it. The neonicotinoids, just use what you can at highest labeled rates for wireworm control.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for either Mary or myself? No? Well, with that, I want to thank Mary for agreeing to participate in our webinar today. She is a wealth of information and has quite a client list that she works with. And so, Mary, thank you for your diligence and your hard work in the field with sweet potatoes and tobacco, etc. And thanks again. We greatly appreciate your help.
Of course. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Hal. We will probably stick around for a few minutes in case there's any more questions. I will also share the quiz again, but I'll be here if anyone has any more questions for me. If Hal and Mary, if you'd like to exit, I can go ahead and keep track of the questions and we can follow up in an email to everyone.
Okay. Did we have a quiz or anything like that?
Yes. We have a quiz which is on SurveyMonkey, and I am sending the link now in the comments. and that is for CEU credits. So make sure to take that quiz, and you should be receiving your certificate within 1 week.
Once again, thank you everybody for attending. If you have questions, just forward your questions in and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. Have a great day.
Teresa, yes, a recording will be available. We did record it, so we will send it in a follow-up email. You can also find it on our website, and you can find all the additional information there.